Hit the music, hit the lights. Oh, what a sight. As you step out to the stage, get the crowd in a rage. Ring the bell and let's fight. 365 nights, it's time to make a change. Let the beast from its cage unleash hell, cause we're going to war. Hit the ground running or take flight and soar. Liverpool is fun. Let's settle the score. And the crowd roars for more till some blood hits the floor and make an impact. Cause we're bringing it back. Cat like kissing last chats. Now's the time to react, to make an impact. Put them under attack. Top speed and full contact. Don't leave nothing intact.
Welcome to the best thing since the best thing since sliced bread. Welcome to PTV. I am your host with the most hot like butter toast, the P to the Y to the R to the O. It's your boy Pyro, and I am finally here in my virtual arena. Welcome to the Wrestlemania edition of Last Week on Wrestling. Now for the Smackdown Wrestlemania Smackdown special. Still does not leave me feeling right. Alright, let's see what this show does. Daniel Bryan cut an impassionate promo, and it was good. Enough said. Then, we had one of the only two matches that matter. It was our fatal four-way tag team match for the Smackdown tag straps. And it gave us the Mysterios versus the Dirty Dogs versus the Alpha Academy versus the Street Profits. None of them got any WrestleMania week entrances. Suck it. Only two men from each team were in the ring once as well. Bad form, WWE. Oh well, at least NXT did it right the other night. The Mysterios almost had this match in the bag after a beautiful father-son 619 on the Dirty Dogs. But then that fat fuck wasted roster space Otis just came in and had to break up the pin. Then everyone hit their moves on everyone, and in the midst of all the madness, Ziggler and Rude picked up the win and retained their Smackdown tag team titles. The Fresh Princess of Belair then cut a promo ahead of her match Mania night on the main event of night one. And Sasha Banks had to get in as well and had some words to say. And again, it was pretty solid. We then watched Big E get a haircut and cut a promo about living in Tampa. It was alright, I guess. Then we wasted time looking at Randall versus Swamp Fiend, which is a Monday Night Raw rivalry. Surely the tag title match could have had more time instead of watching this, and they could have had some entrances instead. Well, whatever. Then, to prove we were killing more time than was absolutely necessary, we had a random throwaway singles match between Nia Jax and Tamina. And sure, they both get entrances, because this match is important. Ew. I don't know why, but Tamina looked like a humbug in this match. Literally, look at her attire, wrapped up like a humbug. And that's about the best thing I can say about it. The match was boring and just existed to eat time. They could have gone to absolutely anything else. And it didn't even have a proper finish. It ended in a DQ, because of course it did. Just boo. All the boo to this. Boo you. Seth Rollins released an advert. It was amusing. Edge cut a promo. And he got an entrance, because of course Edge got an entrance, because it's Edge. And then, it was a very good promo. I mean, you know, when it comes from Edge, he rarely cuts a bad promo, especially since his return. Sasha Banks cut another promo, and that was alright, I guess. Sami Zayn went off on a rant and got a stunner for his troubles, or didn't, might as well have done. But then it was the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royale, and like 3 of the 4 guys who had entrances, and everyone else was just jobbers and jabronis were just there. Personally, I would have cut at least half of the chit chat out of this show and given everyone entrances, and I'm still struggling to understand how 2 of these 3 matches that actually mattered could have been put into a 2-day Wrestlemania card somewhere. Put them on the pre-show. That's an hour long. There's probably going to be nothing than chat. Take one match, put it there. Take the other match, put it there. Job done. And let SmackDown be SmackDown. But no, Wrestlemania SmackDown. I'm not going to break down all the eliminations in this, but here's some stuff to take note of. The former Retribution guys were still in their old shtick, and they got a few eliminations before Ali eliminated Mace, and then Teabag. The final 5 were Jey Uso, Shinsuke Nakamura, Boring Carbon, Ali, and Ricochet. Ricochet took out Ali, and then Khali and Jey Uso took out Ricochet, and then Nakamura Kinshasa Corbin out of the match, and it came down to Nax versus Uso. But ultimately, Jey Uso would pick up the win for his family and for the table by eliminating Nakamura from this match and winning the Andre the Giant trophy. Roman Reigns came out to offer his cousin a little nod of approval and show him job well done. And then the big dog had to cut a promo, and that's it. That's how we're going to end the show. That's what you get. 3 matches and a whole lot of prattle. This was the most go home show I may have ever seen WWE slap on, and it definitely didn't feel like a Mania special. How do we the fans do against this? 1. This and Raw both get 1s. But this hits us in the dick with a low blow, rolled us up and grabbed the tights. This was short and shite. I hope WWE are lowering expectations so that they can over-deliver Saturday and Sunday with Wrestlemania. But yeah, this was the pits. Boo. Just boo. So into Hardcore Justice we go. The event opened with a triple threat tag team match which saw Ace Austin, TJP and Josh Alexander, each of which had to find a surprise tag partner for the match. Now, to no surprise, Ace Austin chose Madman Fulton. As a good throwback, TJP chose Fallah Bahh, but the biggest surprise, or only surprise, came when Alexander decided he was going to team up with a returning Petey Williams. It was good to see the TNA original back and pulling out some of the classics, and after a Canadian destroyer from its innovator and an ankle lock from Alexander, the Canadians picked up the win by submission. D'Lo Brown and Matt Striker then ran us down the card before we ran into Chairly Legal, a match in which steel chairs were legal between Shearer and Hernandez. Now, I was hoping that with Tommy Dreamer, the innovator of violence himself, running the show, that we'd see some creative and original chair spots. But in the end, Rohit Raju interfered and helped the Indian Lion win, and the award for Best Chair Spot of the weekend goes to Kyle O'Reilly and Adam Cole from NXT TakeOver's main event. And you can catch those events in episode 1. We went to Swingers Casino next to set up a Great American Bash match between Matt Cardona and Johnny Swinger later in the night. But first, it was the Good Brothers Doc versus Decay's Black Taurus. I do think they missed a trick by making this a singles match, but it was a good enough power man hoss fight. Taurus showed some agility, but the wily veterans won after Doc hit a choke bomb and pinned Taurus for the 1, 2, 3. It was our Great American Bash match next, and the ring was surrounded by mystery crates up on each ring post that if you could open them, you could then legally use whatever was inside during the match. Swinger would be the first to open a box, but only found a picture frame. Swinger also dipped into box number 2, but only to find a mousetrap on his hand. Ouch. Cardona went to box number 3, but chose to put the lid back on it for now because he was going to keep that shiz for later. Meanwhile, Swinger was digging through box number 4 and eventually found some Brock's Knuckles. It didn't matter much though, because Cardona hit radio silence for the win and left whatever was inside box number 3 a mystery for now. Sally Callahan came out next, and he was annoyed because he didn't have a match, so he issued an open challenge. This was soon accepted by someone called Sam Beal, which was a mistake on this jabroni's part because after a swift brutalising, the Death Machine hit his package pile driver and pinned the rookie to pick up a pretty easy win. Next up, it was our blindfold match between Brian Myers and Jake Something. And it's hard enough to get behind this match in the best of times, but especially without a crowd, because that's the whole point. The crowd are the eyes for the good guy, and they mess with and misdirect the blind baddie, but whatever. This match went blindly back and forth until Myers pulled the ref into the way of a clothesline to take him out, so that he could lift his hood, peek and cheat. But Matt Cardona was back with his crate from earlier, and he slid it to Jake Something, who smashed it on Myers' head to reveal that it was full of action figures. And Jake Something was able to pick up the win with the 1, a 2, a 3. The Knockouts were out next to crown a number 1 contender in a weapons match between Jordan Grace, Susan, Tennille Dashwood, Havoc, Rosemary and Alicia Edwards. As Susan was making her entrance, Su Young's music hit, and it seemed in the mist that the Undead Bride took control of the wrestling Karen, because out of the fog came the Undead Bride herself, and the match was away because the two were essentially the same person. It was a solid showing from Su too, and it was looking like she'd be the one to win. That wasn't until all chaos erupted in the final act of the match. Rosemary brought out thumbtacks and looked to drop Alicia Edwards onto them, but she reversed it and partly sacrificed herself to put Rosemary down. Liz then broke out Kendra, her kendo stick, and battered Rosemary right in the head with it. But then Su Yung popped up out of nowhere and got Alicia with the mandible claw, and the two of them disappeared into the crowd. Or at least where the crowd would be. Havoc was going to go after Grace, but Nevaeh turned up and threw some shit in her face. Kayla with a K even got involved and super kicked Grace right in the face, allowing Dashwood to sneak in and nab the pin on a beaten and blinded Havoc to pick up the win and become your new #1 contender for the Knockouts title. Beer pong broke out into violence in Swingers Casino next, and then it was right into the career versus title match for the Knockouts Championship between Jazz and the defending champion Deonna Purrazzo. The champ worked the arm because of course she did. Jazz hit an X Factor for a 2 count, but the champ ultimately hit the Queen's Gambit and picked up the pin and the win to retain her title and end the 3-decade career of the legend Jazz. Then we rolled into the main event, Hardcore War. Striker and D'Lo went over the rules, and then we went backstage to see that Tommy Dreamer had been beaten up. But the show must go on, so Eddie Edwards kicked things off for his team against Dina from VBD. The two went back and forth for the first 5 minutes, but after Eddie Edwards hit a backpack stunner at the top of the slot, Rhino head out to give VBD the numbers advantage. Rhino and Dina enjoyed their advantage, taking it to the Boston native, until Willie Mack came out to even the numbers for a while. Willie whacked Dina in the face with a chained wrapped right hand and then took down Rhino so the good guys could take it to Dina and smack him up a bit with Kenny the kendo stick. Willie then punched a toaster into Dina's junk, and that's a sentence I never thought I'd say. But at that point, Joe Doring came out for BBD and business, as they say, was about to pick up. BBD then took their time dismantling Eddie and Mac. Dina put Mac's hand in the toaster and tried to rip off his wrist to get some revenge from earlier, but then the Impact World Champion came out with a disabled sign on a table so that Rich Swann could even things out for the good guys. But then, of course, the back and forth numbers game would continue as per the rules of this match, and out came EY with a hockey stick. BBD, now joined by their leader, just beat the cap out of the baby faces as long as they could enjoy the numbers advantage for the last time. Now, Tommy Dreamer was supposed to be the last man in, but because he was beat up, Scott D'Amore found a suitor replacement, and out came Trey Miguel with a golf club. The match was then officially on and able to be won by one team or the other. Everything went mental and everyone was hitting moves on everyone. Rhino gored Rich Swann through a table. Speaking of hitting everyone, Joe Doring hit a monstrous Tower of Doom bomb on 5 guys, including EY. Doring then looked to put Eddie Edwards through a table, but instead Trey Miguel hit Doring with a flying meteora down through Eddie and the table, and all 3 men got wiped out. Everybody down. But back in the ring, the rest of VBD had the Mac surrounded. Now, with the Mac being the Mac, he tried to fight back and got in some good shots, but the numbers were just too much, and EY hit a pile driver and pinned the Mac to pick up the victory for VBD. And that was it. That was our main event for Hardcore Justice, but how did we, the wrestling fans, do against Hardcore Justice? It was alright, but it felt like a particularly good episode of Impact more than it did a Wrestlemania week pay-per-view. So, it kicks out at 2, and TNA leaves us losers again. Hardcore Justice certainly wasn't as strong as Mania Night 1. In fact, I would go as far as to say it wasn't even as strong as AEW Dynamite. Not bad event, but a pretty average outing. True. But now we get into what we all came here for. Let's take a look at Wrestlemania as we roll into Wrestlemania Night 1 right now. You got to suit up for Wrestlemania, so without any further ado, let's get into the granddaddy of them all and look at Wrestlemania Night 1. The pre-show shizzle was all just chit-chat and reviewing the night's matches, so let's get straight into the actual event. Vince McMahon came out backed by the entire locker room to deliver an inspiring speech about coming out of the pandemic and welcoming the fans back to Wrestlemania. Oh, and we've got a new now, then and forever sequence to truly mark the start of a new era in WWE. But if a year wasn't long enough to wait for Wrestlemania and for fans to be back in attendance, we had to wait a little bit longer because rain forced the first match back 30 to 40 minutes. We had some impromptu interviews in the meantime from a few of the superstars that were ready for action later in the night. Titus O'Neil and Hulk Hogan attempted to warm up the wet crowd and they got things going the second time around. There was a few boos mixed in with Hogan's reactions, which just goes to show that people hadn't forgotten that he's a complete piece of crap. We did eventually kick off the main card for the night one with the WWE Championship match between Drew McIntyre and the WWE Champion, the almighty Bobby Lashley. This was a throwback clash of super heavyweights and a great classic way to open the floodgates at WrestleMania weekend. You could see the pure emotion on Drew's face too when he made his entrance. I'm not crying, you're crying. Big Bad Bold Bobby's entrance was just as grand, and man, the arena looks cool as hell. This was a great opener. Solid back and forth to begin with neither man really having much of an advantage. Drew looked for a Claymore a couple of times, but Bobby Lashley shut him down with monstrous spine busters. Drew hit Lashley with a trio of Future Shock DDTs, but Big Bad Bold Bob powered out at 2. Lashley went for the Hurt Lock a number of times, but Drew had an answer. That is until the third time. This time Lashley hooked it in fully and forced McIntyre to pass out to pick up the win and retain his WWE Championship. Long live the Almighty! Bayley then turned up to gatecrash the NWO reunion backstage. She got a 2 sweep from X-Pac and Hall, but Nash and Hogan didn't want to know and the legends left the role model hanging. Tag Team Turmoil was up next to decide number 1 contenders for the women's tag titles on night 2, and this was essentially a tag team gauntlet match. Naomi and Lana were out first, and they started things off against the team of Carmella and Billie Kay. Billie Kay has been comedy gold lately, and that really showed in her entrance alongside Carmella. Billie has been great on Smackdown and one of the best things on the Blue brand, and it's really a shame that the Iconics got let go in the axings that came after this week. Naomi and Lana almost put Billie Kay away after a double X Factor, but Carmella made the save. Billie Kay then got a surprise roll-up, and with a little assistance from Carmella, Billie Kay pinned Lana and sent her team back into the back. The Riot Squad are out next, and Billie Kay and Carmella tried the same trick on Liv Morgan, but got caught out, and soon after the Riots eliminated Billie Kay and would move on to face Dana Brooke and Mandy Rose. As we all know by now, Mandy Rose fell flat on her ass on her way to the ring on the still wet ramp, but the blonde bombshell soon made up for that slip up by taking it right to the Riot Squad. Their look wouldn't hold out for long though, as Liv Morgan reversed a swanton into a pin on Dana Brooke to eliminate her team, but the Riot Squad's reward was a third match against the veterans Natalya and Tamina. Natty went straight for the sharpshooter, but Liv got out of it. The Riot Squad got a near fall after hitting Tamina with a series of fast-paced double-team moves, but Tamina shut that shiz down with a super kick. The veterans hit the heart attack, and Tamina hit a big old splash on Ruby Riott to pick up the pin and the win, and to go on to face Shania on Sunday for the straps. King Ross will be pleased. Seth Rollins vs Cesaro was next, and Seth was as a bitching new tune. Pyro approves. Cesaro exploded out of the gates with a flying European uppercut and was looking for the swing from the start. Seth Rollins hit a huge superplex into a Falcon Arrow, but Cesaro kicked out at 2. Cesaro went after a swing again and did eventually get it, but only got in 9 rotations because his arm gave up on him, which is something that Seth had been working on throughout the match. Seth hit a sick corkscrew frog splash, but only got a 2 count. Cesaro then got a near fall after a neutralizer. Seth hit the pedigree after a bunch of mad counters, but again the Swiss Superman would kick out at 2. Cesaro then hit a UFO airplane spin and then the big swing right after, and this time he went for 23 rotations. One more neutralizer and a 1-2-3 later, Cesaro wins his first singles match on a Wrestlemania main card. And that was a fantastic match. The Dirty Dogs were backstage next to cut a promo after retaining their belts on Wrestlemania Smackdown. And they predicted a victory for AJ Styles in the Raw Tag Team title match, which is up right now. Big E was out to introduce his boys, the New Day! And it was nice, albeit brief, to see the three back together and just draped in gold. AJ and Omos came out next, and Omos was going to kick things off. That is until Kofi Kingston goaded AJ into the ring instead. The New Day's plan here was simple: to cut off the ring in half and keep Badman Alan Jones away from the Colossal Omos. And they did it well for a while, isolating AJ, taunting the Colossus. New Day really took it at AJ and just would not let him get the tag. When he did finally get the tag though, the roof came off and Omos arrived. Woods kicked him, nothing. Woods then tried a drop kick and literally just bounced off the big man. Kofi Kingston jumped off the top, but Omos caught him and just yeet him. I think the New Day might have actually shat themselves. AJ clocked Woods with a phenomenal forearm off of Omos' shoulders, leaving Kofi and Omos alone. One giant choke slam and a one-footed pin later, and it was 1, 2, 3, and new Raw Tag Team Champions, the phenomenal AJ Styles and Omos. And that, my friends, is just too sweet! Phenomenal. There was a quick look at WWE 2K22, but I don't know, it doesn't look very new. They wouldn't have just made the same game again, right? Right? Braun versus Brain rage in a cage with Dumbass the Tank Engine and Sweaty Shane then rolled around. Jerry the King Lawler was on commentary with the Raw team, and it was nice as a nostalgic touch for all of about 30 seconds, but then like him, things got real old real quick. Shane used his brains and his goons jumped the train before it could get to the cave. You may say it's unfair that they beat him with chairs, but the furniture just further fueled Strowman's rage. Shane threw jabs and quicks and showed that he's quick, but the monster wasn't taking no shit. Coast to Coast got a two from McMahon, and Elias and Riker had themselves a plan to extract the sweaty billionaire, but Strowman left their plan in despair. Enough of the rhymes though, because Strowman then literally ripped the side of the cage off and threw Shane up the cage. Yes, that is a sentence I just said. Braun then yeeted Shane right off the top of the cage. One power slam later and the Monster Among Men picked up the victory. That's right kids, the lesson here: if you get picked on and called stupid, just murder your bullies. Be a star. Bayley was back, this time to crash the Raw announce table as they led into the Hall of Fame segment. Bayley then apparently morphed into Booker T, as up next it was Bad Bunny and Damien Priest versus The Miz and John Morrison. Speaking of bunnies, there was dozens of furries everywhere in the ring as Miz and Morrison made their way out to the ring performing Hey Hey Hop Hop. Well, kinda, but they clearly forgotten half of the words. We saw the video package for the match whilst Miz and Morrison were hopping around in the ring. I'm kinda disappointed that Priest and Bunny weren't two of the rabbits, but damn, Damien Priest's entrance looked cool, so it is instantly forgiven. Bad Bunny then stole Becky Lynch's entrance from last year at Wrestlemania, rode into the arena on Optimus Prime. This match was alright, but it was very samey. The formula here was sadly the same as the New Day match, and Bad Bunny's big spot was the same as the one from the Royal Rumble. The end saved this match though, and credit where it's due, Bad Bunny did hit a Bunny Destroyer on Jomo on the outside, and then a cross-body Doomsday on Miz, and uno, dos, tres, your winners Bad Bunny and Damien Priest. We then took a look back at some of the highlights of the night and Sunday's card, but then it was time for your main event of the evening, the Smackdown Women's Championship match between Bianca Belair and champion Sasha Banks. The video package for this match was solid, and so was the match itself. In the early going, Sasha went for a suicide dive, but Bianca caught the champ and pressed her up over her head and marched back to the ring, up the steps, and threw her in the ring. She really is the strong S. After a showing of strength, Belair went for the 450, but Banks got her knees up. Sasha then hit a sweet double springboard tornado DDT and followed up with a frog splash, but only got a 2 count. The Fresh Princess Belair nailed the 450 the second time round, but still only got herself a 2 count. Bianca Belair then whipped Banks so hard with her hair, I popped. To be fair though, throughout the match, Sasha had been using the braid against Bianca any chance she should get. But when Belair hit the KOD, it was 1, 2, 3, and your new Smackdown Women's Champion is Bianca Belair. Wrestlemania Night 1 was great. It had some dips, but for the most part it consistently delivered exactly what it needed to. But as fans, how did we do against WWE Wrestlemania Night 1? That's an easy win for us, and it's a 1, 2, 3. This is what WWE does so well, and it shouldn't come as much as a surprise that Night 1 would deliver. But the bar is now well and truly set, so how would Night 2 do? Let's find out right now. So into Wrestlemania Night 2 we go. WWE made an odd choice and decided to open Night 2 with Randy Orton versus The Fiend. I would have thought that it would have gone on later in the normal Taker spot, but hey ho, let's go. But first, Hogan and Titus came out dressed up as pirates to warm up the crowd, and it is hilarious to hear that Hogan still got booed to the briny deep. In all fairness, once they wasted all that time with video packages and chit chat, it was at least a bit darker, and it was darker still after Randall's 7,000 year long entrance, and then the video package for the match itself. It was then time for The Fiend to make his entrance, but apparently magic had fixed him and he was no longer burnt, and after walking down a tunnel, shaboof. Twisted Bliss was out first, and she got to the bottom of the ramp and there was this giant jack-in-the-box waiting. Bliss cranked the handle and out came The Fiend, reborn in full. The Fiend dived off the jack-in-the-box with a flying clothesline and we were away. Orton hit 2 vintage DDTs, but The Fiend just got back up. The Fiend reversed the RKO into the Mandible Claw, but then Zombie Bliss distracted The Fiend, allowing Randall to hit the RKO and pick up the pin and the win. The Viper scurried away and The Fiend looked on at Bliss as the lights went out and then they both vanished. This whole thing was just weird. Bayley was back and she crashed a backstage moment between Titus, Hogan and Eazy-E Eric Bischoff. This was just more orcs. Honestly, it's an odd start for Night 2. Let's hope it gets better. We then had our first championship match of the night as the women's tag titles were on the line. Tamina and Natalya were out first as they had won Tag Team Turmoil on Night 1. The champs then head out to the ring together this time and without Reginald. The Vets and Shania put on a solid match here. We had a nice giantess square off between Nia and Tamina. Natty slung Shayna straight into a super kick but only got a 2 count. Tamina kept looking to get a big old body slam on Nia too, but to no avail. The champs then took control and Shayna put on a submission clinic, dismantling Natalya. Nia got her licks in too, but once Natty made the hot tag to Tamina, business picked up. Tamina looked as good as she's ever looked here. She did finally get the big old body slam on Nia a la Hogan Andre Mania 3, but that only got a 2 count as well. Tamina went for the splash but crashed and burned, and Natalya managed to hook in the sharpshooter on Nia, but Shayna was legal. So Shayna snuck in and slapped on the Kirifuda clutch and tapped Nia out to retain the women's tag titles. Next it was KO versus Sami Zayn and the story of crumbling friendships. JBL was on commentary here to check out the conspiracy theories, and it was nice to hear the WWE Universe sing along to Sami's introduction. Ashley Zayn then brought out Logan Paul, but then it was time for the KO show. Zayn ran straight into a pop-up powerbomb but managed to roll away. Sami hit KO with a sick brainbuster on the apron and tried to get KO counted out, but Kevin Owens managed to get back into the ring at 8. KO hit a huge bullfrog splash for a 2 count. These two then threw all of their moves at each other. Sami hit a Helluva kick but played with his food too long and went for a second and ran straight into a super kick. One more super kick and a stunner later, and it was 1, 2, 3 and a Wrestlemania victory for Kevin Owens. After the match, Logan Paul checked on Sami and went to congratulate KO, but Ashley Zayn kicked off. Logan Paul then raised Kevin's hand and got a stunner for his troubles. So Logan Paul was pointless? Anywho, moving on. Speaking of things that are pointless, Matt Riddle bumped into the Great Khali backstage. Thank God RVD turned up to make the segment bearable. But it was then time for Twat Riddle versus Sheamus for the US title. Why do blind pigeons fly out of Riddle's feet? I was hoping for a short Sheamus squash match here, shades of his title matches against Daniel Bryan at Mania's Path. But sadly, these two actually put on a match instead, and I had to put up with Riddle for another few minutes. But fortunately, Sheamus soon smacked Riddle with a bro kick whilst he was upside down mid-moonsault, and 3 seconds later, we had a new United States champion. The Intercontinental Championship was on the line next in a Nigerian drum fight between champion Big E and challenger Apollo. Wale played Big E to the ring live, but hilariously, Big E accidentally exposed the fact that Wale was lip-syncing. Brilliant. Apollo then head out with his giant earbud. The bell rang and the two went straight for kendo sticks and smacked the crap out of each other. Big E hit a huge inside-out spear and then went to fetch the steps. Apollo destroyed a kendo stick on Big E, but then missed a splash through the table and crashed and burned. Big E hit the big end on Apollo, but then got murdered by a debuting Babatunde, who hit Big E with a spike and a chokeslam and dumped Apollo onto the champ. Apollo then picked up the pin and the win to become your new Intercontinental Champion. Asuka vs Rhea Ripley was up next for the Raw Women's Championship. Ripley had a live music entrance too, but someone forgot to tell the sound team because the singer's mic was really quiet. But at least she actually did perform her song, so swings and roundabouts. Asuka's entrance had a random fart of cherry blossom petals in it, so that's a thing. Average entrances aside, these two went at it. The story of this match was very much the ferocity of Asuka against the raw power of Rhea Ripley. On several occasions, the challenger looked to exploit her power advantage and embarrass Asuka, but the champ kept coming back. Asuka planted Ripley with a savage DDT off of the apron to the floor. The two exchanged submissions for a bit, but once Rhea Ripley hit Riptide, she pinned Asuka 1, 2, 3, and became your new Raw Women's Champion. Hulk Hogan and Titus were out next and got gatecrashed by Bayley again. Bayley demanded Pyro, not me, the fireworks, and somehow got it. She was on a whinge fest until the Bellas came out to interrupt. The Bellas then beat up Bayley and stood tall with Titus and Hogan. It was all sorts of odd, but thankfully it didn't last long. Speaking of odd, if Wrestlemania Smackdown, and 2 nights of Wrestlemania wasn't enough, in May we get Wrestlemania Backlash. Anywho, mercifully the main event was next, and it was our triple threat match for the Universal Championship between Daniel Bryan, Edge, and Roman Reigns. And the award for best positive reaction of any entrance goes to the rated R superstar Edge. Heyman was oddly quiet tonight and kept eyeing up the belt rather than Roman. I wonder if that'll pay off later. Roman Reigns threw his challengers out of the ring one by one, and they both met Jey Uso super kicks upon their landings. Edge kept his receipt though and dropped Jey with an execution DDT on the steel steps, which would take Jey Uso out of the match for now. Edge reversed a Superman punch attempt into an execution, but when Edge went for his spear, Roman Reigns got his Superman punch in instead. Roman and Edge then speared each other in what would have been the only decent spot in Roman vs Goldberg last year at Wrestlemania if it wasn't for dang Corona. Daniel Bryan then kicked everyone and hit Edge with a running knee. He then kicked the big dog right in the noggin for a 2 count. Bryan hooked in the yes lock looking to make Roman tap for the first time on record, but Edge was in to break it up. Roman powerbombed Daniel Bryan through the announce table and then instantly ate a spear from Edge. D-Bryan Angry Dad Edge then got the head of the table in a submission sandwich, and the keen eye will notice Roman tapped here, but no one saw it, so the match rolled on. Edge speared everyone and pinned the champ, but Daniel Bryan would pull out the ref before he'd count the 3. An unhinged Edge then let rip with chairs on both men before setting them up for concertos. Edge delivered the concerto to Daniel Bryan, but then Jey Uso came back, but Jey just got a spear. But then Edge got a spear from Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns concertoed Edge and then stacked and covered both men to retain, winning an awesome triple threat main event with the 1, 2, 3, pinning 2 Hall of Famers. But how did we, the wrestling fans, do against Wrestlemania Night 2? It certainly wasn't as consistent as Night 1, and it had its ups and downs, but by the end of the main event it left me feeling good. That's the point, right? So, although it's not perhaps as strong as Night 1 or either night of TakeOver, I'd say we still come out winners here, and even if it is a sneaky roll-up, we the wrestling fans get the 1, 2, 3 and come out. Well, that's it for Wrestlemania, but how did things look in the aftermath? Let's look at the Raw after Wrestlemania right now! And so we roll into the Raw after Wrestlemania. Annoyingly, Raw kicked off with that twat Matt Riddle pestering Big Bad Bold Bobby for a match. Bobby caved, smacked him about a bit, and that was that. We have a new commentary team, made up of these guys. Those guys, right there. And we quickly rolled into action with Matt versus Bob, and Lashley took Riddle off of his scooter with a clothesline as he was coming down the ring, and then he threw him in the ring so that the first match could officially begin. Later, Lashley yeeted the scooter and then just went back to beating down the bro before then yeeting him into the Thunderdome. When we came back from break, the Almighty continued to maul Matt mercilessly, and then one Hurt Locker later, it was time for Matt to bro home, because the Almighty Lashley had won by submission. Rhea Ripley cut a promo ahead of her Wrestlemania rematch against Asuka later on, and then we saw the Viking Raiders return to action against Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander. The Raiders looked great out of the gate, and they picked up a big old win with the Viking experience in the 1-2-3. Asuka said she was ready for Ripley after a WrestleMania rematch for the Raw Women's title, and that was up next. But first, we had the surprise return of the Queen Charlotte Flair, who insisted the cameraman hold the ropes open for her so she could cut a promo about missing WrestleMania. After the break, the title match got underway, and this was a condensed and concentrated TV version of their match from Sunday. And again, the story was Fury versus Power. These two had a good back and forth, but when Asuka hit a DDT off the apron and things spilled to the outside, the Queen came back and kicked the crap out of both a champion and challenger alike, causing a double DQ. Maurice is back, and she's going to be on Miss TV, much to Joe Mo's surprise. Shania watches Mandy's fall from Saturday on replay, and then the sexy muscle friends bitch slap the supersized Samoan, because they're going to have a match later. Alexa Bliss then popped up in her playground and explained her actions from Sunday. This didn't quite make up for the things that happened on Sunday, but with the bizarre new addition of Lily, colour me intrigued. I'll tune in next week to see what happens with this crazy little ragdoll. Miss TV got underway, and after plugging Miz and Mrs. and looking back at Bad Bunny and Wrestlemania, Damien Priest headed out to remind everyone that Bad Bunny did in fact beat The Miz at Wrestlemania Night 1. This set up a handicap match between Damien Priest and The Miz and Morrison. As Maurice, she deranged, and she was like, both of you fight him instead of arguing about it. Priest pretty much had this match in the bag to begin with, and he hit a South of Heaven chokeslam on The Miz, but Joe Mo then broke up the pin at 2. The numbers were just too much for Priest to overcome though, because between Miz and Morrison and Maurice and Miz losing his pants, Miz managed to get a sneaky pin with his feet on the ropes, with Maurice holding him down, to get the cheeky win on the 1-2-3. And then everyone fell over, and it was so funny and hilarious. Women's tag action next, and Mandy Rose and Dana Brooke took on Shania. Shania tripped her arse up on the way into the ring, and the chaps took control for a while until Nia slipped up again. Then this match just got weird because Mandy and Dana just walked away. And yeah, they were just like, oh, it's not worth it. The whole thing was just weird. Oh well. MVP was out next, and he cut up a big promo about Bobby, how he ran at Wrestlemania, and how he was looking for her as his next challenger. And then he got interrupted by McIntyre. McIntyre said, I want to have a go. And then they got interrupted by Braun Strowman. Strowman was like, I want to have a go. Then Randy Orton came out, and they were like, we all won at Wrestlemania, we all should have a go. And they all had points about who should be the next in line for the WWE title, so Adam Pearce head out, and he booked a 3-way #1 contenders for later in the night, which I guess is going to be our main event. And then if that's going to be the main event, what would have the main event been if these 3 guys hadn't come out and just been like, I want a WWE title shot? And at least there is some earning here with the #1 contenders match, and they're just going, title shot, give me now, okay, title shot, bruh. But yeah, this was weird. Next, it was tag team action between Elias and Jackson Riker, and they were taking on the New Day. The two teams chat about each other's respective losses and their downfalls on the grand stage Saturday, and then the match got underway. The two teams went back and forth, but the New Day put Shane's goons away and picked up the win. Randy Orton then cut a promo about our main event, and we got the return to the Firefly Funhouse, And again, it's like the night's word was weird, because this was weird. In a nutshell, Bray said he'd be back better than ever, and yeah, he then had a bit of a breakdown. Main event time, and it was our triple threat #1 contenders match between Drew McIntyre, Braun Strowman, and Randy Orton. Dumbass the Tang Engine went for his Strowman Express run around the ring. He just ate some steel steps from Big Daddy Drew to the face. Strowman later returned the favour, and he clocked Drew in the face with the steel steps, and then he shared them with Randy too. Randy Orton hit a big old RKO on Braun and went for the pin, but before he could get the 3 count, Drew came in out of nowhere and broke up the count with a claymore to Randy Orton's face, and then picked up the pin to become the win and your new #1 contender. And then, again, the word of the week, weird. The theme continued, because after the match, Teabag and Mace, formerly of Retribution, the guys who used to lose to the Hurt Locker all the time, attacked Drew as MVP, looked on from the ramp. And why? Like I said, right, this is all weird and backwards, because a couple of weeks ago, the Hurt Business was broken up because Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander lost and they weren't getting the job done, and they're like, oh, you interfered and made me look weak, and like I need help taking out Drew Galloway. And then Bobby Lashley was like, oh, I need help taking out Drew McIntyre, Galloway man, for Wrestlemania, and if you help me, I'll give you the title shot instead of him. So that's contradictory, right? Then he spends like a couple of weeks on his own, and he gets help from the guys who they beat the shit out of for weeks before that. So it's like, these guys weren't good enough, so let's get these guys who we already know are losers and rebuild the Hurt Business. I don't know. It was just... I guess we'll just have to find out next week how this pans out. So how did we, the wrestling fans, do against Raw after Wrestlemania? Well, it was leagues better than the Raw before Mania, and I'm intrigued to see what happens with bits of it next week. So for no other reason that I'll say that we get the 1, 2, 3 and just eke out a win over WWE. But it probably gets a 2. Ugh. This is my life. And finally, let's take a look at the TakeOver aftermath as NXT arrives in its new home on Tuesday night. Well, your brand new NXT champion, the only undefeated 2-time champion, Karrion Kross, was out first to reflect on his win at TakeOver and basically put the entire NXT roster on notice. Speaking of new champs, MSK were out for action next, and they were defending their newly won titles against the team of Drake and Dane, who become #1 contenders in a match on the pre-show at night 2. Now, this was a good enough match, but it was nothing special. Those rascally MSK lads were entertaining enough, sure, but something just felt missing. I can't really put my finger on what it was. After a miscommunication and missing the sacrificial powerbomb, Dane ate a cutter and a kick. MSK then hit Drake with their finisher and pinned him to retain their NXT Tag Team titles. Imperium jumped Dane after the match and stood over the former contender, announcing their intentions to challenge next in line, or maybe next in line, I guess we'll see. But yeah, basically, Imperium wants some of them tag titles. Robert Stone was then shown backstage saying that he was going to try and get a women's tag team title shot for the Robert Stone brand. But instead, he ended up getting a match between Mercedes Martinez and Jessica Meyer because Robert Stone hadn't paid Mercedes Martinez the money that he owed her. So we're going to get that match a bit later. Before we could get into the aftermath of the unsanctioned match, we first saw Roddy arrive with his wife Marina Shafir. They then showed us highlights of Cole versus O'Reilly's match, and after the match, both men being stretchered out. And frankly, Adam Cole might have been beaten, but he was still having enough energy to give it all that. Good on him. Mercedes versus Kamea was next, and this didn't last long as Mercedes got the upper hand pretty fast, hit a driver on Jessica Meyer and pinned her for the win. Mercedes then went right after Stone for what she was owed, and she got it. She then called out Gonzalez, and she just kind of left. The Way were being interviewed next ahead of their 8-person tag match, and this would be the first time they'd all teamed together in one single match. Swerve forgot, then cut a promo, and this episode of NXT was beginning to feel very roary. Too much chit-chat, not enough big match action. The undisputed NXT Cruiserweight Champion Santos Escobar made his way out with LDP to issue an open challenge next. But even this had endless chit-chat, as Escobar gloated about his victory and said that he'd basically put the division on the map and that he's not wrong, but I want to get to a fight, damn it! And a fight we'd get, because once he was done yakking away, Kushida answered the challenge. Now, this match was for the NXT Cruiserweight Championship, and the match was fast-paced and hard-hitting. Kushida would get a near pin with a bridging suplex, but Escobar would get his foot on the ropes at the last minute. These two then just went about kicking each other in the head. Like, that's a thing. They then trade a few pins, and in a weird twist, Kushida came out on top, and just like that, we had a brand new Cruiserweight Champion. 1, 2, 3, Kushida is your new NXT Cruiserweight Champion. But then it was right back to the chit-chat, and Ciampa had things to say, namely that him and Thatcher were also on the run for MSK's tag titles. Then, even more chit-chat, Jordan Devlin challenged Kushida in a future title match for the Cruiserweight title, and then even more chit-chat as Raquel Gonzalez head out with Dakota Kai to cut a promo about winning the NXT Women's Championship. But then the lights went out, and Frankie, formerly known as Ty Valkyrie, had arrived, complete with a little lapdog. This added up to yet more jibber-jabber, with the point being that Guerra Loca would soon be coming for the NXT Women's Gold. Then things took an unexpected turn as Raw Women's Champion Rhea Ripley arrived. And it turns out she was just here to congratulate her old friend and rival. And then Bianca Belair arrived, and she wanted to do a bit of the same. And then for a moment we had a beautiful image of 3 new women's champions, all of which at one point came from NXT, holding up gold that they'd won over the weekend, together in the ring. The 3 hugged it out, and it was a beautiful visual, and it was just more talky bollocks as Pete Dunne had a moan and said he wants some gold as well. Seriously, it was just talk on NXT, and then there was more talk, but good talk I suppose. William Regal announced that NXT had signed Saray, and that she would make her debut next week. Then, sadly, yet more talk. Roddy had something for William Regal back in his office and handed it to Regal, and said that he was done. It made it look like Roderick Strong was leaving NXT. Regal even said he'd be welcome back any time. I hope that's not the case, but after what felt like an hour of mostly just talking, we finally mercifully got to a match. It was between Leon Ruff and Swerve Scott. These two just don't like each other. Ruff hit a cutter, but Swerve rolled out of the ring. Swerve later hit his big move, pinned Ruff for the 1-2-3, and that was it. We were then right back to chit-chat, as if our lives depended on it, and if the world was going to end if someone wasn't talking, because Zoe Stark was up next, and she was being interviewed. But Mercedes Martinez interrupted that, and it looks like these two are going to have a match, or try and make their way towards the Women's Championship through each other, but then there's whatever. We then mercifully fed our last scraps of in-ring action for the night, with a 15-minute, 8-person mixed tag match between The Way, who were teaming up together for the first time, and the team of the NXT Women's Tag Team Champions Shotzi Blackheart and Ember Moon, along with Dexter Lumis and Bronson Reed. There goes the tiny penis. Peter. This match was just weird and all over the place. Indy Hartwell was all love-struck by Lumis, as has been the story of the last few weeks, and Candice Ray even had to tell her off for making kissy faces and stop her from trying to make out with the Silent Psycho opponent. Bronson Reed showed off his power game, as he does so well, and at one point hit a huge Samoan drop on both Gargano and Theory. Things then went all batshit crazy, and everyone hit moves on everyone, including Candice Ray hitting a flying tornado DDT on Lumis on the outside. Shotzi then volunteered to have Bronson Reed yeet her out of the ring and down onto everyone else. And then there was what was admittedly a genius move, because after a bunch of chaos, Lumis had Gargano in a submission hold and Indy came in to break things up. But because she's all gaga over Dexter and she loves him, instead of hitting him, she threw herself loudly on the ground and played dead. This distracted Dexter, who actually showed some emotion and let Johnny go so he could check on her. And as he was helping her up, Indy again got all kissy-faced, and this allowed Theory to run in from behind and knee Dexter right in the back of the head. This then upset Indy, so she threw Austin out of the ring and then lay back down so that Loomis could carry her away. It was genius. It was the best part of the storytelling in the match, and it was very good. Ember Moon then hit an eclipse off of Bronson's shoulders, but Candice threw Ember out of the ring. Blackheart then helped get rid of LeRae, and then Big Bronson hit the tsunami on a prone Theory to pick up the win and end the night on somewhat of a high as his team stood victorious. But how did we, the wrestling fans, do against NXT TakeOver Fallout? Well, as with Raw, you could tell Mania season was already over. TakeOver Fallouts are usually so solid, and with this being NXT's arrival on Tuesday nights, I expected bigger things. There was entirely too much talking and chit-chat throughout the night, so I'm afraid that this kicks out at 1 and scarpers away with the victory, leaving us feeling like losers. So, that's it. That's the last week in wrestling, from the Raw before Wrestlemania to the Raw after Wrestlemania and NXT TakeOver Aftermath, although you could just call that a talk show. And that's how things went. How does they rank and stack up against each other? I would say that the treating night 1 and 2 together are both TakeOver and Wrestlemania. The best product to come out of the week by far was NXT TakeOver Stand and Deliver. The worst thing to come out of the week was Raw and, unfortunately, NXT Fallout from TakeOver. The Raw before Mania didn't feel like a Raw before Mania, it just felt bleh. The Raw after Mania was better, but again, it was just weird. And NXT TakeOver Fallout was talk. On to the better stuff. Impact Wrestling was solid, good but not great. AEW Dynamite was pretty damn good. And then the big shows themselves, Hardcore Justice, alright outing. It didn't feel like a pay-per-view, and it didn't feel like it needed to be on the WrestleMania week card. It kind of felt like a particularly good episode of Impact, but, you know, it delivered. Impact itself was right. WrestleMania Night 1, Night 2. Night 1 was so good, Night 2 was up and down. Down to begin with, then it picked up, and it left you feeling good at the very end of it, but it was right to get there, and it was a slog. I'm not going to lie, guys, it was an absolute slog. Because, I mean, you're 9 shows deep at that point. The winner of this week in wrestling, by a long shot, is NXT TakeOver Stand and Deliver. It delivered consistently on Night 1 and Night 2. There wasn't really a bad match between either card. And that's all I have to say. And there we have it. That is it for our Mania edition of Last Week on Wrestling. How do things stack up for you? Let us know in the comments below. I'll be back next time with Thursday Night Thunder, Fairy Tale Friday, or Last Week on Wrestling Episode 3. Until then, I've been your host with the most, your boy Pyro. You can find me right here at Pyro Biggs on YouTube, and Ryan Pyro Biggs on Facebook, and on Twitter, and a Biggie Pyro on Instagram. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you all next time. But until then, I love you all, and there's not a goddamn thing you can do about it. But for right now, Pie's out. Peace out, and lights out.